All right, let's dive right in, shall we? Today we're taking a deep dive into the Apartment 3B case file.
Ooh, this one is a real head-scratcher. A classic locked room mystery.
Exactly. And you know our listeners love those, so gather around, folks, because this one's got it all. Suspects with secrets, a seemingly impossible crime.
And hopefully by the end of this, we can all try and piece it together and see if we can crack the case right alongside the detectives.
That's the goal. We start on a gloomy, rainy morning at the Greenview Apartments.
Mm?
Our victim, Sarah Lively, a freelance journalist known for always being on time,
Very punctual, yeah.
was found dead in her apartment.
And the locked door is what really kicks things off. You know, it just throws a wrench into everything right from the get-go. Suddenly, it's not just a whodunit, but also a howdunit.
Right, because it really narrows down who could have even been there in the first place. So we've got this locked room, and then we add another layer. Sarah was working on this expose about, some shady dealings with the landlord.
Oh, juicy. Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Oh, absolutely. So let's step into Sarah's apartment. Apartment 3B. What's the scene look like?
Well, imagine this. You walk in, and everything is neat, almost too neat, like eerily perfect.
Okay, that's a little creepy already.
There's a cup of cold coffee sitting on the counter, her laptop's open like she was working on something, and there's this lingering scent of lavender in the air.
Okay, so nothing too out of place yet. What else?
Well, that's where things get interesting, because then you notice a broken mug tucked under the couch, almost hidden, and there's this scuff mark by the window.
Ah, see, those are the details our listeners need to be paying attention to. In a locked room mystery, every little thing matters.
Absolutely. Even the tiniest clue could be the key to figuring out how the killer got in and out of that apartment.
So let's talk about our suspects. First up, Alex, the seemingly harmless guy next door. He claims he didn't see or hear anything unusual.
Yeah, but the thing about Alex is he's just a little too, I don't know, polished in his responses. Like he's trying too hard to seem innocent, and he avoids eye contact. Always a red flag.
It's like he's over-rehearsed his story, right?
Yeah.
And what's even more suspicious, later on, they find a blood stain on the window latch, and guess what? It's a match to Alex.
Oh, wow. Talk about a twist.
Right. Of course, he's got an explanation ready.
Yeah.
He says it's from an old cut, from helping Sarah fix that same window a few weeks back. But is that really the whole story?
Well, that's for the forensics team to figure out. They can tell whether that blood stain is fresh or weeks old, can't they?
Exactly. They'll get to the bottom of that. But for now, let's move on to our second suspect. Emily, the artist who lives in 3D. Now, she and Sarah had a bit of a history.
Noise complaints, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there was definitely some tension there. And when the police question her, she's a nervous wreck.
Well, I mean, wouldn't you be? But sometimes it's more than just being rattled, right? It's like she's hiding something.
And then, get this. Sarah's phone goes missing, and guess where they track it to?
Don't tell me. Emily.
Emily. She claims she just found it in the trash and, because she was short on cash, decided to pawn it.
Okay, that's a pretty big coincidence, don't you think? Finding a missing phone in the trash, especially when you've got a history with the victim.
It does make you wonder, right? Now let's bring in suspect number 3, Michael, Sarah's ex-boyfriend. He was actually seen leaving her apartment 2 nights before the murder, and witnesses say they were arguing, pretty heatedly too, about Sarah's big article on the landlord.
Ah, so maybe not so much of an ex then. Or maybe just some unfinished business between them.
Maybe. And we know Michael had warned her to be careful. He said she was poking around in some dangerous territory with that article.
Yeah.
Implicating powerful people.
Yeah, you gotta wonder if maybe someone took those warnings a little too seriously and decided to silence Sarah permanently.
Chilling thought, right. So we've got 3 suspects, each with their own secrets, their own potential motives, a locked room, and a whole lot of questions.
It's like a puzzle with all the pieces scattered everywhere.
And it's up to Detective Moreno to put those pieces together.
It really is like piecing together a puzzle, isn't it? Each new bit of information we get just adds another layer of complexity.
And with this case, the locked room is the biggest puzzle piece of all.
Right. It's such a classic mystery trope, but in real life, it just throws a whole new level of difficulty into the investigation.
I mean, how do you even begin to figure out how a killer could have gotten in and out of a locked room? Especially when everything points to, no forced entry.
Well, first things first, you got to eliminate the obvious stuff, right? Could Sarah have accidentally locked herself in somehow? Was there some secret passage we don't know about?
Or maybe, just maybe, The killer was clever enough to make it look like a locked room when it really wasn't.
Ooh, now that's an interesting thought. And this is where that little detail about the scuff mark by the window becomes super important. Was it just a random mark, or could it be evidence of someone tampering with the window?
See, this is what I love about these cases. What seems like a tiny, unimportant detail could end up being the key to the whole thing.
You're absolutely right. It's like, in a locked room mystery, you can't afford to dismiss anything.
Speaking of things we can't dismiss, let's circle back to Emily for a second. We talked about her money problems, right? And how that could explain why she pawned Sarah's phone. But how does that fit into the timeline of the murder itself?
That's where good old-fashioned detective work meets the digital age. You see, investigators can dig into Emily's financial records. They can pinpoint exactly when she got that money from the pawn shop.
So it's not just about taking her word for it, but actually verifying her story with hard evidence.
Precisely. And in today's world, those digital footprints can tell you a whole lot more than you might think.
It's like they leave a trail, whether they realize it or not. Okay, now let's shift gears back to Michael, Sarah's ex. Remember, he was the one who warned her about her article, right? He knew she was stepping on some toes with that expose on the landlord.
Yeah, but the question is, was he just looking out for her, or was there something more to it? I mean, sometimes those warnings can be a way of covering your own tracks, right?
Right, like maybe he was involved somehow and was trying to get her to back off for his own sake.
Exactly. So investigators would want to look into Michael's connections, see if he had any ties to the people Sarah was investigating.
It's like everyone in this case has their own little secrets and agendas going on.
Oh, absolutely. And as Detective Moreno digs deeper, you start to see the cracks appear in everyone's stories. Emily's financial woes become even more suspicious. Michael's concern starts to look less genuine. And Alex's carefully constructed nice guy image starts to fall apart.
So everyone's got a facade, but underneath there's a whole lot more going on.
That's human nature for you, right? Everyone's got something to hide.
We've talked a lot about the suspects, but what about Sarah, the victim? What kind of person was she? Was she someone who, made enemies easily or took risks that might have put her in danger?
That's a great point. Understanding the victim is just as important as understanding the suspects. Think about it. If Sarah was known for ruffling feathers or pushing boundaries, that could open up a whole new set of potential suspects, right?
People who might have had a reason to want her silenced, maybe.
Exactly. And her job as a journalist, well, that kind of comes with its own set of risks, doesn't it? You're constantly digging for the truth, sometimes in places people don't want you to look.
So it's like her work put her in a vulnerable position in a way.
Right. Investigators would be looking into whether she took precautions, if she made any enemies along the way. It's all part of building a complete picture of the victim, trying to understand her world and who might have wanted to harm her.
It's like building a profile, right? Trying to see the world through Sarah's eyes and figure out where she might have crossed paths with her killer.
Exactly, because sometimes understanding the victim can be the key to understanding the crime itself.
So, as we head into the final part of our deep dive, Detective Moreno is facing a mountain of evidence, a tangled web of suspects and motives, and this central mystery of the locked room. The stakes are high, the pressure's on, and the search for the truth continues. Right, so we've got her suspects, we've got the evidence, but what we really need now is that aha moment for Detective Moreno, that point where everything just clicks into place.
It's like suddenly all those loose threads, all those seemingly random clues suddenly come together to form a clear picture, right?
Exactly. It's like the light bulb moment, the breakthrough that cracks the case wide open. So what's that moment for Detective Moreno? What makes everything fall into place?
Well, it all comes back to that lock room. Remember that scuff mark we talked about, the one by the window?
Yeah, I remember. Seemed like a pretty small detail at the time.
Right. Well, it turns out it wasn't just a random scuff. It was evidence that someone had been messing with the window latch, specifically to make it look like the room was locked from the inside.
Wait, so the killer staged the whole locked room thing. But how did they lock the door from the inside if they escaped through the window?
That's where the missing spare key comes in. Remember, Sarah had reported it missing a few weeks before.
Oh, yeah, right. I'd almost forgot about that.
Well, it seems like our killer had been planning this whole thing for a while. They used that spare key to get into the apartment and set the stage for the murder.
So they used the key, committed the crime, then locked the window from the outside to make it look like a locked room mystery, and took the key with them. That's pretty devious.
It is, isn't it? And it takes a certain type of person to pull that off. Someone who's not only capable of murder, but also someone who's really good at planning and thinking ahead.
So it's not just a crime of passion then. It's more calculated, more cold-blooded.
Exactly. And that really narrows down the suspect list, doesn't it?
So who does that point to? Who fits that profile?
Well, this is where all the clues we've been talking about finally come together for Detective Moreno. The scuff mark, the missing key, even the way Alex was acting too nervous, too rehearsed. It all points to him.
Alex. But what about his explanation for the bloodstain on the window? He said it was from weeks ago.
He was counting on the police not looking too closely. It was a gamble, a way to explain away the blood without raising too much suspicion.
But he didn't count on Detective Moreno, did he?
Nope, she was too sharp for that. She saw through his act. She knew his explanation didn't quite add up.
So what happens when she confronts him? Does he break down?
He does. He confesses everything. He admits that he was in love with Sarah more than he ever let on. And when she rejected him, it sent him spiraling.
So it was a crime of passion after all, but twisted, distorted by obsession and a need for control.
Exactly. His confession just lays bare the dark side of unrequited love, The possessiveness, the rage that can build up when those feelings aren't reciprocated. It's a reminder that even behind seemingly normal facades, powerful emotions can be simmering just beneath the surface.
Wow. So what happens to the other suspects, Emily and Michael?
Well, with Alex's confession, everything else falls into place. Emily is cleared. The investigation proves that she did find that phone in the trash, just like she said.
Thank goodness for that. At least she got her name cleared.
And Michael, well, he's heartbroken, of course, but he makes sure that Sarah's article, the one she was working on, gets published. He makes sure her work, her voice, isn't silenced.
That's a fitting tribute to her, isn't it? A journalist to the very end.
It is. And, it just shows the power of truth. You can try to bury it, try to silence it, but it always finds a way to come to light in the end.
Well said. Well, folks, there you have it. The Apartment 3B case. A twisted tale of obsession, deceit, and ultimately justice served. Did any of you suspect Alex all along? Or were you thrown off by the red herrings? It just goes to show you sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you got to watch out for. It makes you think, doesn't it? About the secrets people keep, the darkness that can hide beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. What are your thoughts on this case? What stood out to you? Let us know. We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, the truth is out there just waiting to be uncovered.